And we're live, streaming live to you from the footsteps of New York City. We are Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and we're delighted that you can join us for our unique podcast community, where we explore the issues and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. Please remember to like our videos and subscribe to us on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. Thank you so much to our community. We recently, last week, we hit 1,000 subscribers. This week we gained 300 new ones, and we're so excited to bring you such great guests and interesting topics. And please feel free to reach out to us and let us know what guests you'd like to hear. We have world-renowned opera singers who sing on the leading stages of the world. We've had indie pop bands. We have great conductors, people in a variety of genres, all with the conversation to talk about the issues and challenges we all face. And by doing that, we can learn so much from each other. Please also remember to like and share our videos. We really appreciate that. It helps grow our community, and we love that. So please also, to see our past 110 past episodes, you can go to our website at www.jasontram.net. You can also see all upcoming guests. We have a wonderful guest for you today. We have Dr. Colin Britt, who is a dynamic conductor and composer and pianist and many other things. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you, Jason. So good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking a break from all your editing. And I know we're all in editing mode. I know I am too. I've got an alma mater project and for an upcoming charter day at my university at Seton Hall. We're delighted that you can make the time.
Yeah, no, we were talking right before we got on about all of the editing, and it really is a different world that we inhabit as choral musicians now, because so much is virtual. I have my New York choir has a concert actually next Sunday, and so I'm sort of gearing up for this week of kind of getting in the last edits and putting it all together.
So you do a lot of that yourself, huh?
So yeah, I've been between my three different sort of positions, I've been doing a lot of the video editing. For my church choir, I do all of the audio and video editing. We do 1, 2, and sometimes 3 videos a week. So that's been a labor of love. Yeah. Fortunately, that choir is a smaller group. It ranges from about 12 to 16 singers each week. So it's a little more manageable than, say, a 40 or 50 voice or more choir. But then for my community group, which is the West Village Choral, we've been able to delegate some of our editing. I have a good friend who is an audio engineer, and he's been helping us a lot with some of our projects. And a couple of choristers have actually learned some of the video editing software. But I would say I probably do about a third of the overall edits for those concerts as well.
Amazing. Who would have thought, like a couple of years ago, with all our busy schedules and our lives running from rehearsal to performances, that we'd have to learn so many new skills so quickly?
It's really, and I've been sort of saying to myself that adversity is the mother of invention, and we've kind of had to overcome this major existential crisis for our field, right? And right at the beginning of the pandemic, you saw that kind of flurry of activity as people started reaching out to people who knew how to do virtual choir videos to begin with, but then a bunch of us started learning the technology, and it's been a long road, but I'm certainly grateful to have the mental capacity and some of the energy to be able to contribute to that.
Well, yeah, it's amazing to see how we've all adapted, how conductors, because the most important thing, being choral musicians and educators, is to keep our communities together.
Yeah, and that's been a big part of, I think, why a lot of my adult singers have stuck with it, is because having just that regular once a week rehearsal where you can still see everybody face to face has been so important. My church choir, we have a half-hour virtual happy hour before each rehearsal where people can check in, share news. Since it's a church choir, there's often a little bit of praying that happens. And same thing for my community group. We have a virtual happy hour, and then we get to see everybody's faces. We can't hear each other sing because it's impossible to have live singing on Zoom, certainly. And there are some softwares that do allow people to sing in real time or close to real time, but it's just a little more complicated. And I think that given the demographics of those groups, it's often just easier. So you see everyone's mouths moving, and you can sort of have little conversations, but it's still so much better than not having that contact.
Yes, because it's just the when you're used to doing rehearsals, when you're used to socializing, it's just so important. We found it so important to maintain that and to keep people's morale up. We need to sing. People need to get their, music is such an important outlet for the emotions we feel, and without that, I think a lot of people would be hurting even more.
Yeah, and that first video that you played, I wrote that piece probably within the first 4 days of the pandemic because,
Wow.
if you remember back March 12th, almost exactly 1 year ago now. Today I called day one, March 13th being the first day that everything had been shut down.
Ground zero.
Yeah, and so it's been a year now, and I just remembered feeling that sense of despair and isolation and kind of just total loss. What do we do now? And when I put that sort of invitation out there among my social circles, there was just such a huge outpouring of interest and kind of everybody feeling the same, feeling like, what are we going to do when we can't sing together?
Finding our relevance and finding our footsteps. And I know for myself, and I have two choral societies. I have my university job and my summer kind of residency at Ocean Grove, trying to figure out how to make things relevant to the people and what they would feel comfortable interacting with and their level of technology, and and then being
Yeah.
able to troubleshoot people who had any issues. It took a lot of time, and it was a constant. It was like trying to reinvent our art form every day.
Absolutely, and I mean, so much of what we do is sing, as choral directors and singers is listen to what we can hear live, and not being able to do that, not being able to respond to the sound in the room. You have to rely a lot on what you hope people are actually listening to when you say it. And I think that's one of the reasons that having recordings, having the technology to actually be able to make these videos, it gives us some small sense of that normalcy, right?
Colin, why don't we go back in time? Tell us now, did you always know you wanted to be a professional musician, and were you from a musical family?
So my parents both sing and play guitar. My mother played a little bit of piano, and she actually started teaching me piano when I was 5. Although I wouldn't let her, I wouldn't call her mom. She had to be Ms. Music, or else I would, the teacher thing wasn't working for that because of the dynamic. Um, but so from age 5, I knew that I had an interest in music. I wouldn't say that I really knew at the time, or for much of grade school, that I really wanted to do this as a profession. But I would say by the time I was in middle and high school, I knew that I wanted to do something with performing arts. I was also active in theater, and I did a lot of theater as a kid. And I briefly toyed with the idea of going into acting, at musical theater, until I realized that I can't act. And that was around the same time that I was discovering both my love of composing and my passion for conducting and music direction. And so I applied and got into school for music composition, and I did a lot of choral singing, conducting there. I went to the Hart School, and I was very, very lucky at the school to have a mentor and teacher in Ed Bolkovac, who
Shout out to Ed Bolkovac. I did my
yeah.
master's at the Hart School, and I had Ed on the show in the summer.
Yeah, exactly. Another somebody who's been having to reinvent how we do our choral profession. But Ed, recognized that I had a real passion for choral music. He gave me private lessons as an undergraduate, which is I'm
Wow.
very fortunate to have been able had that opportunity. And he really encouraged me to pursue it. And so that was kind of when I really wanted to move in the direction of choral conducting. I'd been singing in choirs my whole life, obviously, but really choral conducting as a vocation kind of became my path at that point. And then
Ed's such a deep thinker. He's such an amazing deep thinker and a philosopher. And
yeah, and just such an amazing human being who just gives so much, and just if there's somebody that he can help in any way, he will go out of his way to do it. And then I did my master's at Yale, with Maggie Brooks, Jeff Dalma. Simon Carrington was there for a year, so I got to study with Simon too. It was his last year. And then after 3 years of working as an adjunct faculty member and doing some more church music, I on the advice of many of my former teachers, said, if you're going to do the doctorate, you should really do it. And that was how I ended up applying to Rutgers, where again we share a little bit of a lineage there, where I studied with Pat Gardner.
Maestro Pat, a fantastic teacher, and he's been at Rutgers for a long time, doing wonderful work there. And he picks one doctoral student per year, and I think I was there 5 or 6 years before you were, and I learned so much, and it's an incredible place.
Yeah, and he just I think completed the package of the academic studies for me, and really kind of fostered in me a real love and passion for music history, which despite having been a musician all this time, I didn't quite understand how music history makes you appreciate the music you're doing so much more. He just has such a love for that, and obviously just such a gifted teacher all around.
And bravo to Rutgers for their continued success at the national conventions, and it's just so wonderful to see that. And
the Glee Club is at the national convention this coming week, actually, virtually, but
hey, listen, that's wonderful, and continued success to Pat Gardner, and we'll give him a public shout out.
Yeah, definitely. And so then after completing my doctorate, I had sort of had a couple of appointments that came up shortly thereafter. One was my New York choir, the West Village Choral. Another has been ongoing since I moved to New Jersey in 2013, which is my church choir in Jersey City. And then in the spring of 2017, a position became available at Rutgers Preparatory School. And I was contacted via Pat from their headmaster, who was looking for sort of an emergency replacement. And I didn't go in really knowing anything about the music program there. But I fell in love with the community, and with just being able to reach students at that age and introduce them to their first love of music, which is something that I had never had that experience before. And so it's been 4 years now, actually, and it's been really fun to get to see that program grow and to help students along their way.
4 years, that's great. And I find the energy of teaching, I taught high school at the beginning of my career. I did 6 years at the public schools, and there's so much energy. Like I remember there was every day that you get students in your office who just love music, and you can mold that and build that love of music and watch them go on to do wonderful things. It's very rewarding.
It really is. And I've had a few students who, start with me their first or second year in high school, and they have no idea that they love choral music. They kind of come and they're like, okay, I can sing. And then, watching them kind of those connections fire, and by the end of it, they've just become completely obsessed with it. And it's really gratifying to help people find something that they love that much.
We have our first question from the audience. This is a funny one. I remember when I saw this for the first time. So this is Amanda from Jersey City asks, "Tell us about Call Me Maybe."
Oh goodness! Hi, Amanda.
I saw this at about 2000. Was it 2008-ish?
Well, it was a little after that, but okay. So yeah, because "Call Me Maybe," I think the song itself came out in 2011.
Okay.
So a friend of mine, a dear friend, Ariana Bella, who's on the choir, the director of choral activities at Amherst College now, but she and I were classmates at Yale, and we sort of worked in the same area for a few years after Yale. And one of our ongoing sort of jokes between each other was to sort of do pop songs in a very anachronistic way, do them very operatic, or just take Poker Face by Lady Gaga and sing it as a operatic recitative with a harpsichord, just something that takes a little bit of musical understanding to appreciate the humor of, but not in a way that derides the song or belittles the song. It kind of puts it in a funny suit. And so we decided we were going to record this kind of tongue-in-cheek choral orchestral version of Call Me Maybe. We recorded it Labor Day weekend in 2012. And then it went viral on YouTube. I think it got over 2 million views in the first month. And so then we were invited the following spring to audition for America's Got Talent.
Oh my God, that's so much fun.
Yeah, and so this is kind of this crazy, it felt literally like 15 minutes of fame. It was, all of a sudden this group of 50 or 60 friends who, are all really talented singers, instrumentalists. We're doing this thing for fun because it's fun to hang out together and play together, which, is kind of one of the best parts of music. And all of a sudden we were, on the stage at Radio City Music Hall, and Howard Stern and Heidi Klum are out there looking at us going, why did you pick this song? But yeah, so it was pretty much just under a year from when we first recorded the song until when we were at Radio City. But it was definitely a whirlwind ride.
Well, I saw that back when it first came out. Everyone saw it. It was all over the Choral, all over Facebook and all over our different feeds. And I didn't know you at the time, but I'm like, someone really talented is behind this because it's so clever.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, and we arranged it together, and we wanted to put in these sort of musical tropes that people might recognize from other genres, and sort of say, it kind of takes a little bit of the stigma off of being a serious classical musician. If you see people who can do something like this, who are obviously very talented performers, but they like to have fun too.
Having fun is so important, and the image can be stuffy, and when you break that wall, people realize, oh, these musicians really are in the current zeitgeist and they can relate.
Absolutely, yeah. But that was definitely a fun little episode. And I'm pretty sure Pat introduced me to every single student at Rutgers my first year by saying that I was the guy who had done that video of "Call Me Maybe."
I remember getting an email, something about the effect. I'm like, how many views? It has like 3 million views. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly won't complain about the free press. It was certainly not what I was expecting people to know me for, but
well, they know you for so much more now. Your career has grown, and you've expanded your reach to affect so many lives. What's it like? I know it's having a reach across so many different generations, teaching the school, having the choral societies, and you also do a ton of composition, really high-level composition. What's it like going back and forth and seeing the effect you have on such a wide variety of ages?
Well, it's deeply humbling to know that this many people from all these different walks of life, as you point out, are dedicated and committed to what they do and what we do together, and that they've trusted me with the opportunity to make music with them. So for me, it's invigorating because you get a different level of people's experiences and a different side of what motivates them. So my students at school, they're high school. They're they have a lot of energy in every regard, and often I'm just the last thing that they see at the end of the day, and they're just looking for a little bit of release, and they don't realize that sometimes they're also making really, really profound music. They're just there to have fun. And obviously then there's the other students who are have really dedicated and want to make music at a higher level, but you see sort of that side of things, and then you see the adult vocational singers who come to me at the end of the day, and they want to have that sense of community. A lot of them, it's their friend circle, or their where they some of them where they met their spouses, and they're there because they love communal singing, they love choral music, and they have a real passion for it, and that's how they choose to spend their Thursday nights. So it's definitely you can use different sort of language and terminology with these different groups, but at the end of the day, we're still joined by our shared love of music.
It's such a blessing to be a musician and to affect people that way, and it means so much to people, that community. It's so important that they get to sit next to their people and they get to feel like they're part of something special, and then to get to create music together is really is an honor as a conductor.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And then as you mentioned, I do wear a couple different hats as a composer. I'm interacting with people in a slightly different way. And there's something, because I don't work with most of the ensembles who are doing pieces that I'm commissioned to write, except I come in at the end. A lot of them don't know me the same way that singers would know the conductor of their ensemble. And so it's you feel kind of like you're stepping into somebody else's house and you're the guest, and and at the same point, it's kind of like you've made this elaborate meal for them. You hope that they like it, and you hope that they like asparagus, and that and so there's always that sense of, is will this be good enough for this group? And I've been very happy to get to work with a lot of people that way, and it's really really exciting.
We've had a fair number of composers on the show so far, and I always ask some of these questions. I'm always interested to the composer's process. How many commissions do you try to do a year? What's maybe a pre-COVID year? Let's start with a quote-unquote normal year. What did it look like? How do you balance your schedule between your teaching, your rehearsals, and then your composing?
Yeah, it is a balancing act. Pre-COVID, or as I like to call it, the before times, I would probably have had 3 or 4 major commissions a year. So not a hugely active schedule for, say, a full-time composer, but a manageable amount for me, in such a way that I can devote enough time to each piece, but still also be working as an active performer. 2020 was going to be my best year yet. I had three major premieres, 2 of which were canceled or postponed. One was for the 100th anniversary of the Hart School, and the 75th anniversary of the New Haven Chorale, and one was for the Maine Bicentennial. And so, yeah, the statehood day was March 15th, and they had to cancel, or they postponed it, and it's still in limbo, right? They had to postpone it 2 days before, again, because of the pandemic. But so two major premieres that were scheduled in the spring last year. But yeah, I would say that's, 3 or 4 major events a year is fairly regular for me.
Do you write for your own ensembles as well?
Yes, but I'm always trying to walk that line of not over programming myself. And I feel like, and I've had, when I was actually interviewed for the West Village Chorale, one of the questions they asked me was if I was a composer, if I wrote for my ensembles, because their previous conductor had also done that. And I think that singers really get excited when they know that a piece has been written for them. Obviously, it needs to be good. If I gave them a piece of music that they didn't like to sing, that's another problem. But I've found that when it's not overdone, I don't want to write and have be all about a vehicle for Colin Britt. It's about the singers and about making music together. But I've written a number of pieces for most of my groups. And then I did write one piece for my my high school select group last spring, which unfortunately we didn't get to perform because of the pandemic. And then obviously West Village Chorale has done a couple of my pieces as well.
Got another question from the audience. This is a Stephen from Maryland, and he asks, what was your first published piece, and what was it like seeing a piece of yours in print?
So it's Afternoon on a Hill, which is also the first choral piece I ever wrote. I wrote it when I was a student at Hart, and I worked very closely with Ed Volkovac to sort of finesse it. We'll say it was rough around the edges, and he helped me sort of say, okay, think about what it's going to be like as a singer singing a high E for 8 measures. Not all choirs have basses that can hit low Bs, so maybe don't write that. But so that piece, then I gave it to actually Simon Carrington, who we took it on tour to China, I think in 2009, and then he later said, if nobody's published this piece, I'd love to send it to my publisher at Alliance. Which of course I said yes,
please. Exciting.
So yeah, and so I have a couple of pieces in his series with Alliance, but that was the first one. And I mean, it's so exciting to see. I've printed out so many copies of my music and handed it to people, so I'm seeing my name at the top of the page isn't that exciting. But when you get a nicely published octavo that has your name in big letters on it, it feels, you pinch yourself. So yeah, it was very exciting.
And what companies have you published? Who do you publish with regularly?
So Alliance is one of them. I have a few pieces with GIA, and I have a couple pieces with Edition Peters.
Wonderful. So people look up those pieces. They're going to do some wonderful repertoire and really exciting music.
Thank you. But yeah.
So how has COVID affected your compositional outfit, your output?
I mean, it's interesting because I often get asked, do you write pieces for fun or for yourself, or do you usually write them for commissions? And given that I have such an active schedule as a conductor, it's hard to make time to write purely for yourself, and I feel like that's pretty consistent with most composers that I talk to. The flip side is that there have been fewer commissions because nobody's really been able to program anything right now, and we're all kind of, again, in that holding pattern until we're given the go-ahead to reopen concert halls and theaters. And so, like I said, I wrote that first piece that you played very early on, and I wrote that just because I needed to write it. And there have been a few pieces that I've written this year that I wasn't writing because they were commissioned pieces. It was because I felt like I had something that I needed to say, and that was the medium through which I could express it. But I will say, as somebody who doesn't make their full-time living as a composer, it has definitely been a slowdown from pre-COVID times.
That will pick up again, and all those commissions that you did write will get performed. It's just there's a queue now of waiting to get those pieces onto the stage as the stage returns.
Yeah, and I know we're all just so excited about seeing this light at the end of the tunnel coming, and the thought of being in the same room with other singers again is so tantalizing.
One of my dear friends, Justin Beck, who you know as well, wrote he loves your version of "There Is No Rose."
Oh, thank you, Justin. Justin is a dear friend and a wonderful, wonderful singer. So I wrote "There Is No Rose." I wrote it for the New Haven Choral, and they premiered it in, I want to say, 2007. It's been done a few times. That piece is published with GIA, and we did it with West Village Choral, I think my first year. And so Justin would have encountered it there. But yeah, that's one of those pieces that I wrote many, many years ago now, but I still can look back and say, oh, I'm proud of that piece.
Some of
which
your
I can't say about a lot of pieces.
Yeah, it's interesting how that changes. Our perspective changes as we go about our life. We look back and I feel that way about some of the recordings I've done, and I'm like, you remember every little detail. Do you have any pieces of yours? What's been like the most successful of your pieces that's gotten the most audience? And did you think that it would?
Well, those two pieces, Afternoon on a Hill and There Is No Rose, probably enjoy the most performance. There's been a couple of pieces I've written for voices and instruments that have had a little bit of a life after. There's a longer sort of chamber work I wrote, about 13 minutes, called The House of Clouds. I wrote for a dear friend of mine, mezzo-soprano named Debbie Wong, and Ariane Abella was the conductor. And that piece has had a few subsequent performances, which is not always the case for larger scale works. So I've been very happy with that. The other thing that's kind of interesting is, I get royalties through ASCAP, and every now and then I mean, it's not a lot, but I still look at them and I say, oh, pieces that have been published, you don't manage the sales of those, you don't, there's no transaction involved. It's just that they find the piece and they program it. And so it's kind of surreal to see that piece being performed out there and not knowing. The other one, it's
exciting
I would
that
say
they have a life of their own. That's exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And which is how it should be. And it's very humbling. There's one more piece I was going to say, which is an a cappella piece I wrote called As There Are Flowers, which I found out somebody shared a video of me from a choir in, I think it was Thailand, doing the piece. And it was just, I had no idea. And it's a published piece. So it's, again, I wasn't involved in the sale. It's very exciting. And that piece also got recorded by a wonderful choir in North Carolina that performed it post-pandemic. And so there's a really beautiful video of them singing it masked in, I think it looks like it's in like the lobby of a football stadium. And it's very, very powerful, very moving to hear a piece that you wrote, years before any notion of a pandemic, and to hear how it's sort of, it is bringing those singers through the pandemic. I was very, very touched.
And music's got that ability to get us through the absolute worst of times. Liam McNamara points out that he loves your setting of "I could not stop for death." I love that text.
Oh, isn't that such an incredible poem? Thank you, Liam. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, so 3 years ago, I think, I wrote a set of three pieces for the West Village Chorale. Speaking of writing for our ensembles, the whole set was called "An Accumulation of Sorrow," and I wrote it in direct response to the terrible Parkland shooting that had happened that year. And so the first movement was a setting of that Emily Dickinson text. And I think Emily Dickinson is just one of those poets that everybody uh, gravitates towards, and I know that there are so many other poets that need to be given a larger audience and need to be elevated to music. But that was a text that just I felt resonated with me at that moment.
Wow. So what has COVID taught you about yourself? What self discoveries have you made in this period that when you look back in the next couple of years, as we go back to our quote unquote normal lives, what are you going to look back and say,
Yeah. Well, I think for one, we'll never take any of what we do for granted ever again. I think of those long rehearsals that I would, go to when maybe the choir wasn't singing at their highest level, or maybe I wasn't really in it, or maybe the music wasn't, we weren't feeling it in the way that we know that we could. And I will never take those moments for granted ever again. Just that being able to be in the same room and share that collective breath, share that sense of immediacy and close connection with everybody else. And we all know that feeling and love it dearly, and we loved it before. But I feel like now it will just never ever we'll never take it for granted. Um, I have learned that I can learn new technology, and that there are certain things that I probably will never want to do again. um, but at the same point, it's nice to know that we have the capacity to adapt as choral musicians, that we have the capacity to reinvent and to recalibrate.
all such useful skills and so important as we go to meet the needs of our communities and to meet the educational, the pedagogical, or the emotional needs of all the people we serve.
Yeah. And then the other thing I think is that I don't know if it's about myself or just about humans in general, but I think that the shutdown affected everybody very specifically, and many people I think felt trapped or isolated or alone. But a lot of people I think really kind of adapted and sort of had moments of self-discovery and self-awakening through that process. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from what we've felt over the last year. A lot of it not very good, but I think that accepting that there has been this shared experience of this pandemic, and that we all have things to learn from it, and maybe we can you know come out of it stronger and more tight knit, and take better care of each other.
I think that this pandemic has forced us all to become, all forced artists to become philosophers. We've all had to think, like, now what? If what we
Yeah.
exist for, what we've trained our lives to be, is now so radically different. What is the role of music in society? What is the role of performers? What is the role of creative professionals when there's nothing, no like live performances? And it's amazing. I started this podcast to explore that with artists like yourself, and I've learned so much about how creative the creative industry can be.
Absolutely, yeah. And the other thing too, I should have said this too, but I went through many months of probably some form of depression, as feeling this, like, this part of me that was made me whole had been taken away from me. But I'm also very aware of how lucky and fortunate I am, and I have to recognize my own privilege as somebody who has been gainfully employed this whole time, whereas many people that I know and love have completely lost their ability to have a livelihood, whether it's Broadway performers or full time vocal soloists, orchestras, and I just know how lucky I am that I've been able to ride out this terrible storm, and really be okay. So I'm just very grateful and aware of that.
Yeah, it's been such a tough time for our colleagues. I think of Broadway. I think of the whole family at the Metropolitan Opera, for example. And we're starting to see the wheels start to turn. People are feverishly planning the return of live music, so we're starting to get the positive signs. What are you thinking about the next chapter might look like as things start to open up again?
Well, I mean, personal chapter. My wife and I are expecting our first child,
Your
and
a
so that
major new role. Congratulations.
thank you. So we're due in July, and so that's kind of first and foremost in my mind right now. But I am I'm very focused on what the music world that at least that I'm directly associated with is going to look like after we can reopen. I think that we're going to have a lot of sort of, if not still virtual live performances, where we have maybe the choir is in person, but they're live streaming, or, then maybe some kind of hybrid setup. I think that we're going to be reinventing how we engage with technology in real time. I think that we are also, at the same time that we've been dealing with a pandemic, we've been wrestling with some really, really serious and important sort of moments of introspection as a country. And I think that particularly the really horrific events of last spring, the George Floyd killing, Breonna Taylor, I think that those kind of awakened in a lot of us sort of an awareness that systemic racism doesn't just exist in city cultures or in policing or it exists in the concert world. And so I think that how we program, how we look at our industry as choral educators, as choral musicians, I think that has also had to go through some changing. And so for me, it's not just let's reopen and figure out how we can bring choral music back to the concert world. Let's also make sure that we're reinventing and reimagining the choral canon to be truly indicative of our history and who we are.
There's so many great voices that we can include, and I think everyone has worked so hard to find those voices and to program in different ways and to rethink our repertoire. I think that's a positive. Sometimes positives are born out of negatives, certainly, but
no, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, I think of the work of Marcus Garrett, who published that just incredible resource on his website. It was a compilation of the title of the compilation was non-idiomatic music by Black composers. And before maybe 5 or 10 years ago, if you saw a person of color being represented in a concert program, it was probably a spiritual or a gospel piece. And it was sort of just this moment of saying, there are a lot of really gifted composers who don't just write spiritual settings, and it's kind of been a musical tokenism. And I think that, my programs this year, I've been working really hard to sort of say, okay, how can I expand my idea of what these concert themes can look like, and how can I expand them in a way that includes these voices that really need to be heard?
It's exciting. Composers like Adolphus Hailstork, and there's so many great composers out there who are not represented, and I think that we're going to see that start to open up more and more as we emerge. Yeah,
and of course, women composers of non-binary genders or transgender composers from all over the world. It's an exciting time if you're willing to embrace the opportunity and not look at it as some kind of obstacle we have to get through, right? It's not a chore, it's an opportunity.
The more voices that join the conversation, the richer the tapestry becomes. I think that's really exciting to learn new composers. On the show, I've been introduced to some really wonderful people that I didn't know, and I'm always out there researching, and it's exciting to just experience and to be around new music as it's being created.
Absolutely. And we as conductors, we have that opportunity and that responsibility to be prophetic in our programming, to represent voices that are marginalized or just haven't been heard yet, and especially as somebody who is a composer, to give a platform to new and exciting voices that we think the world should hear.
Very exciting. Very exciting. So, in your compositions, are you are you including social themes in a lot of your compositions these days?
Yeah, actually, that's been probably the biggest shift for me over the last, I would say, few years. I sort of around the time of the 2016 election, I had this moment of sort of what can I do as, again, a person of privilege, but as somebody who has a voice that can be heard, or a microphone. What can I do to speak up for what I think is right? And I've been trying in various concert programs and also in themes for my pieces to do that. This year, I've been doing a lot of work to sort of speak to our collective experience during the pandemic. And so I've written a couple pieces, or I'm finishing one piece, and I'm about to be writing another piece that uses some of the words of singers who are actually going to be singing them, and uses kind of the answers to prompts that they've given as the libretto of the piece. And it's been really
Neat.
exciting to sort of have that as the canvas that you can work with, and to hear, so people are very profound when you give them the chance to be, and it's exciting to be able to sort of experiment with new ways of telling a story that way.
Now, musical theater has been an important part of your life, as you said, from the beginning and all the way till now. Have you engaged? Have you been writing musical theater pieces as well during this period?
Not recently.
You have to clone
Musical theater.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's hard to find time to stay active in something like that when I do feel very passionately about musical theater, but it's like you said, it's there's only so many hours in the day. When I was in high school, I wrote a lot of musical theater songs, and I've written some songs since then that I would characterize as kind of musical theater cabaret style pieces. But I haven't been writing any particular projects that are specific to theater in recent years.
Maybe in the future we'll look forward to that. And
Yeah, I would
to
love to get back into theater composing. It's still one of my favorite medium.
Colin, thank you so much for joining us today. How can people find out more about your work? How can they learn about your upcoming performances? Where can they go to discover more about Colin Britt?
Well, so I do have a website. It's just my full name, colinbritt.com. It hasn't been updated with dates recently because we haven't had that many performances. But that's certainly one way. My New York group is the West Village Choral, and you can visit them at westvillagechoral.org. As I said, our upcoming concert's actually next Sunday, so March 21st at 5 p.m.
Put that
and
on
it's
your date
streaming.
books, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the plug. But so that's a program kind of relevant to today's conversation. It's called American Voices Rise, and it's mostly living composers and a lot of pieces that are sort of specific to, I think, both our experience of the last year, but also just the sense of optimism and resilience that we are, I think, finally awakening to.
Well, it's exciting as we begin the rebirth, the relaunch of live performing, and we start to turn that page. It's going to be exciting to watch how great conductors like yourself are out there planning and going to make it happen.
No, thank you. Yeah, and I think that's, when we entered the pandemic, we kind of were faced with the choice that a lot of organizations are facing, which is, do you hibernate, do you innovate, or do you fold? and I think that, I think for me it's always been, we have to keep moving forward. We have to find ways that we can reinvent what we're doing, and try not to lose as many people as we can. But I think that approach has really sustained us.
Well, congratulations. These are times that they're not just once in a lifetime. They're once in like a history of the recent memory times. I point out that the Metropolitan Opera and Broadway have never closed for more than a couple days, maybe a blizzard or something, 9/11, but that wasn't for very long, and then it opened up again. Even the Spanish flu didn't cancel the Metropolitan Opera's performance schedule. I mean, we're seeing once in an organization,
Certainly once in a century. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
yeah,
so
it's
been a challenge to figure out the pathway forward. It's kind of a unique. We're all creating it as we go.
Absolutely. But again, I think there's opportunity to be found. And I think that this is kind of leveling the playing field for a lot of people. And it's going to be hard for established artists to regain their position and sort of have to kind of come back and hit the ground running. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of new voices out there that are ready to enter this world, and I think that there is room for all of us. So I'm excited to see what the future brings for our industry.
Well, thank you, Colin, and continued success as you meet the needs of all your varied communities, and look forward to some wonderful music in the future.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you for having me. And everybody, please stay safe, get your vaccines, and good luck.
Much appreciated. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. Our next show will be tomorrow at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, and we have James Schlafer, Brooklyn's shakuhachi flute master. He's one of the only Western flute masters in the shakuhachi flute who's designated that by the Japanese government. We can't wait to meet him tomorrow. He's premiered pieces by many famous composers, and we look forward to having him here. So thank you so much, and remember, keep music alive.